when you speak, all you do is this, right?
Good morning, and we'll call to order the meeting of the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. Ms. Quigley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Your first agenda item is to accept your agenda, which is in order and ready for your approval.
Motion to approve?
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item on your agenda, agenda item number 2, is to receive a general manager's report, and we do have some items we'd like to share with you. I'd like to share with you some recent RTC groundbreakings and a program launch. Last Wednesday, the city of Mesquite, yay, Mayor Littman, yay, held a groundbreaking ceremony for the exit of 118/I-15 interchange. More than 70 members of the community attended and expressed their excitement for the new interchange. This $14.7 million project will not only help divert industrial traffic from city roadways, but it will also serve as a key component to the City of Mesquite's master transportation plans to facilitate smart growth and economic diversification. The new interchange will also allow for a more direct and convenient route for trucks to access the Mesquite Technology Commerce Center. This project will help alleviate congestion and improve safety at the existing Exit 120 interchange for future years. And just, you are always curious about this, this project will create 190 jobs for Southern Nevada. Mayor, would you like to have any words?
Other than thank you very much. This is going to be an awakening for Mesquite, and everybody there is looking forward to what is going to be taking place. A lot of businesses now are looking at us. Some property is going to be closing escrow very shortly. We'll be building or have built a very large truck stop type facility with a hotel probably following at this interchange. The town is excited about it. Thank you.
Great. Next, we'd like to share with you our Henderson groundbreaking event. It's just yesterday, the city of Henderson held a groundbreaking ceremony to celebrate the start of the Volunteer Boulevard Roadway Improvement Project. This $16.7 million project will widen Volunteer Boulevard from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, creating easier access for residents who live in the Anthem and Inspirada area. And I am one of those, so I am so excited. This project will create 91 jobs. And Vice Chair March, do you have any comments?
We're very excited about this project coming into Henderson. It's an important addition. You know, we have a lot of folks that live up in Sun City and Inspirada, and I remember it was just a few years back that we had that snowstorm, and the folks up in Inspirada really had a hard time getting off the mountain for 2 days. And so this gives them more solutions to solving the issues, but it also adds bicycle lanes, important and needed bicycle lanes, so that we can create that separation between the bicyclist and the motorist. And we really are, Henderson recently received a designation as a bicycle-friendly community at the silver level. We're the first community in Nevada to receive a silver designation, and this goes to support that effort as well, that we are a bicycle-friendly community. We're creating more opportunities, and we're creating a safe environment for our public to ride and to travel in and to share the roads. And so we're excited about this project.
And those of us who normally have to drive Eastern every day are very excited to get an alternative. So, yay. Last item on our general manager report is the Yellow Dot program. To assist car accident victims who are unable to communicate or can't remember important medical information, the 2015 Nevada legislature passed AB 176, bringing the life-saving Yellow Dot program to Nevada. Yellow Dot is a simple, voluntary program where participants provide important medical information about themselves and their passengers in the glove box of their vehicles. First responders are alerted to this information by a yellow dot decal placed in the lower left corner of the rear window. Earlier this week, the RTC, in partnership with Assemblyman Derek Armstrong, who's with us today, state and local leaders, first responders, and private businesses launched the program here in Southern Nevada. And here's a short video of the Yellow Dot program explaining it. Do I just press this?
Hi, I'm Governor Brian Sandoval. Public safety is a topmost concern for me, and it's a well-known fact that a victim's chance of survival is greatest within a short period following severe trauma. To help our drivers on the roadway, I'm proud to support the Yellow Dot program. Here to present the program to Southern Nevada is Assemblyman Derek Armstrong.
Roadway accidents happen every day. To assist incident victims who are unable to communicate or can't remember important medical information, the 2015 Nevada Legislature passed Assembly Bill 176. It allows the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada, or RTC, to establish and administer the Yellow Dot program in Clark County. Yellow Dot helps first responders react as quickly as possible at accident scenes by providing valuable medical information about drivers and their passengers. Yellow Dot is brought to life by the RTC in coordination with the Nevada Highway Patrol, local police, fire and rescue, and local jurisdictions within Clark County. This video provides an overview of Yellow Dot and how you can get started today. Thank you for your interest, and remember to drive safely to your destination. To get started with the program, you can pick up a free Yellow Dot kit at participating locations, or request a kit via mail by calling 702-676-1754. Once you have the kit, place the Yellow Dot decal on the lower left side of your vehicle's rear window and fill out the information within the kit. The full Yellow Dot kit includes Yellow Dot decal for the lower left side of the rear window, recent photo of the driver and other vehicle occupants, name and emergency contact information, list of allergies or medical conditions for the participant, name and contact information for the participant's physician or preferred hospital, and information about the participant's health insurance. Once the kit is completed, place it inside of the vehicle's glove box, and you're ready to go. When approaching an accident scene, the Yellow Dot decal alerts emergency personnel to important medical information in the vehicle's glove box. If a driver is unconscious or unable to answer questions, first responders have the information they need to quickly provide critical assistance and treatment. For more information on the Yellow Dot program, visit rtcsnv.com/Yellow Dot.
So now anyone can pick up free Yellow Dot kits at more than 80 locations valley-wide, including senior, community, and sports centers, government buildings, law enforcement locations, and all RTC facilities. Details of the program and specific location information are available on our website at www.rtcsnv.com/Yellow Dot. With the launch of Yellow Dot, we are pleased today to proclaim December 2015 Yellow Dot Month. And here to accept the proclamation is the sponsor of AB 176, Assemblyman Derek Armstrong.
I haven't seen you in such a long time. Where have you been hiding?
Yellow Dot. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown, and thank you to the whole RTC board. This program, I couldn't have said it better myself to give an overview. This program wouldn't have happened without RTC and their support during the legislative session. When I first introduced the bill, I thought it was a great program, but it was really RTC that took the ball and ran with it. So I'm really appreciative to Tina and her team for making this happen, and just thank you to the RTC for making this happen. And I believe this program will save lives in Nevada.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, can I also come?
Yes, please. Councilwoman and then Commissioner G.
Oh, okay. You know, before we had the press conference the other day, we heard from some of the emergency responders who were there, and they said how important this program really was for them, that they would be able to know something about the person in the vehicle and be able to address their medical needs and be more responsive and hopefully save a life or help someone to get to the emergency room. So it is a very valuable program, and thank you very much for all you're doing. Thanks.
Commissioner?
Thank you. I just wanted, for those of us that do like email newsletters, do we have like a one pager or a little paragraph we could add into ours?
Absolutely, yeah. If anybody's interested in including this in
And
their
then I'm
constituency
wondering-
newsletter, I'd love to provide you the graphics and the verbiage for it.
And then I'm wondering if maybe we should, I know you have 80 locations, you said, that have this available. Do the schools have it available, do you know?
Ooh, let me turn to people who would know that.
That might be just an additional place, or maybe through PTA or the school district, just additional, because you think about it with family members, that you'd want to make sure that the kids that might be riding in the car that might
Sure.
have issues as well.
Hey, how fun. Maybe we get it included in
Just
some
another thought. Okay,
school
thank you, Mr.
curriculum
Chair.
too.
idea. Great.
We'll be sure to work with the schools. We right now have it at all the libraries and the community centers, and we're working with the county on that, but we'll be sure to reach out to the schools. That's a great suggestion. We actually are working with emergency responders. We've doing the training video with them, so we'll be sure to I believe all the packets are available at the fire stations too.
I love the school idea, though. We'll pursue that.
It was a very, very well-attended event. RTC staff did a wonderful job. NDOT at the FAST facility was the host. Wanted to thank you. And I think Assemblywoman Dooling and Senator Menendo joined us for the
Oh,
event.
great.
So again, Assemblyman Armstrong, thank you so much. Great, great piece of legislation that, as you said, is truly going to save lives.
I know. Let's give them a round of applause one more time. And with that, that concludes your general manager's report. We have Deputy Director Tracy Larkin Thomason with us to give you the latest and greatest from NDOT, which is item number 3.
Again, for the record, Tracy Larkin, Deputy Director for NDOT.
Is your mic on?
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Can you hear?
Can you hear me? All right. We can waste another 5 minutes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Our biggest news, and it is really big news for NDOT and DOTs across the nation, is we have a new transportation bill. On December 4th, President Obama signed the new transportation bill, FAST. And this is huge for us. It's the first long-term bill in over a decade. The last long-term bill was Safety Lou in 2005. MAP 21 was a short-term bill in 2012, and basically it took 3 years to pass that 2-year bill. So between the two bills, there were 34 extensions or continuing resolutions. So frankly, this is a dancing in the street moment for DOTs across the nation. There actually is a 5-year bill, long-term, with funding. It's called FAST, Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. It allocates about $1.9 billion to the state of Nevada over 5 years. That's surface transportation only. That does not include transit. I do not have the numbers for transit at this time. We haven't seen them. Currently, we receive approximately $350 million annually. This will increase an average to an average of 385 million over the 5 years, and that will range from 368 million in the first year up to 400 million in the last year. We are still figuring it out when it actually starts, if it's prorated, retroactive, and although the bill has been signed into place, the appropriation is not complete until Congress authorizes the funding. So again, over 5 years, that's about 170 million increase to our program. Additionally, there's a very strong emphasis on freight. Each state is apportioned a certain amount. Nevada's received 58 millions over the 5 years at about an average of 12 million a year. An initial review indicates that this program is fairly flexible as long as the program enhances freight. So it can be for capacity, it could be for ITS type of components on the road, anything that enhances the freight movement. There's also a freight grant program, and that's similar to the Tiger Grant program. Other highlights, Interstate 11, near and dear to our hearts. MAP 21 in 2012 gave formal designation for the interstate between Phoenix and Las Vegas. FAST now gives us designation from Las Vegas to I-80 and also from Phoenix to Nogales, which means we now have I-11 designation from the Mexican border to northern Nevada. It doesn't include funding, but it makes it eligible for funding pots in the future along with other high priority corridors throughout the nation. And another one is on tourism. There's an enhanced travel and tourism considerations in the development of projects. So that's also in the bill, and that benefits Southern Nevada greatly. Other than that, Project Neon is moving forward. NDOT is coordinating with the City of Las Vegas on the groundbreaking, which is expected to take place in April. So that's big for us. And then lastly, just a short note that NDOT is working with national organization and other states to host, and along with RTC as one of our partners, to host an autonomous vehicle workshop here in Southern Nevada. And we are discussing basically ways to move forward the regulatory framework used by autonomous vehicles. And that includes insurance stakeholders, the vehicle manufacturers, data receivers, and so on, to get together and discuss what are the challenges to help move that industry forward. And that's it for NDOT. Thank you.
Comments or questions? Commissioner G?
How many currently, Tracy, autonomous vehicle businesses are in the state or asking the state to work?
We have had 5 that we have been tested over the years, and there are 2 more pending right now.
Okay, because we had somebody come to the county commission last week. I forget now which company. And then I know
Delphi?
Pardon?
You had Delphi.
Yes. And then we have what, Google? And who?
You've had Google, Volkswagen, Continental, I think, sorry, I know 2 of them I can't mention yet until
okay,
they're
and then
public,
2 more
but-
potentially coming
And
in.
Delphi,
then.
you had Delphi.
And so they're using our roadways. I know the legislature passed like 4 years ago legislation to allow them to test drive it in the mountains versus snow.
Nevada has actually been on the forefront in the regulatory part. We were the first one in the nation to have like Google on the roadways. We were the first one in the nation to have regulations that allowed the Freightliner Daimler come in this past May, so we started in 2011. There are about 5 other states, and I think the District of Columbia who also now have the program. But that is where Nevada leads in this industry.
And I rode in the Google non-driver 5 years ago. Nobody else would do it. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was, I have to say, any of this technology is fascinating for the door that it may open up. But at that time, we got on a spaghetti bowl. Went through school zone. It was amazing, and it sitting there going, whoa, whoa. But we had no problems at all. It had that. I think they do it through a satellite.
Right,
is what they were doing.
and that's part of the challenges with the data, is they do a lot through satellite. They have vehicle to vehicle, they have vehicle to infrastructure, but some of the challenges are if it's a cloudy day,
Right.
if it's snowing, if you have weather, or you're in a tunnel.
It can
Those
break
type
up
of
that.
challenges, or in other places where they have large canopy of trees over, so those interfere with the data reception.
So that's part of what they're trying to test for, is what that works or
It's
what
part
doesn't.
of what they're working out.
Okay, all right, thanks. Maybe somebody will want to ride with somebody at some point.
Thank you, Tracy.
That brings us to item number 4, which is to conduct your first citizens participation period.
This is the first time set aside for public comment. Those wishing to speak on a posted agenda item, now is your opportunity. Seeing and hearing no one, close this portion of public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the commission, next on your agenda is your consent agenda items, which may be taken in one motion. It consists of items 5 through 22.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next, that brings us to item number 23. This is a presentation, and it will be introduced by our General Counsel, Mr. Greg Gilbert.
Good morning. Item 23 will be essentially a presentation that you received today. This is a presentation on the Transportation Investment Business Plan. Over the past 18 months, a consultant team working with community leaders, stakeholders, and other individuals, interested parties, and the RTC team have worked to come together to present this plan to you today. One clarification just on item 23. Today you'll be receiving the information, and the draft business plan will be made available to the public on a website that they can look at and download and comment on. What we anticipate is over the next 60 days, the consultant team will interact with anyone that chooses to have a comment concerning that draft business plan, and that those comments will be integrated and considered prior to the plan being placed in a final plan. The board will be presented with that final plan after public comment has been considered on the March agenda, at which time the plan will be presented for formal adoption. So today's item is to receive the information. If you have questions, of course, the consultant team will be here to answer them. But at this point in time, I'd like to bring up Jeremy Aguero and David Knowles, who will be presenting on behalf of the consultant team.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr.
But before you start your presentation, what happened this morning in your life?
I was installed as the board chairman for Opportunity Village ARC, so thank you very much.
It's great. It's a great honor and an even greater organization.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
I'm very thankful for the consideration and allowing me to do that before I needed to be here today. I believe a presentation is going to come up on the screen. I just need to hit the little clicker. Oh, perfect. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to just pause before I go through my presentation for a moment and express my thanks to the board, express my thanks to the Regional Transportation Commission, particularly the staff that has worked tirelessly over the past 18 months. Feels a lot longer than that, but I've been told it's only 18 months. I'd also like to express my thanks to the community. I cannot tell you how many people have opened their doors to allow us to come in and have conversations about this real challenge that is in front of us. That includes folks from the public sector and the private sector. I was asked to come up and deliver the primary findings of this analysis to you today. My colleague, David Knowles from CH2M Hill, will be here to talk about the transportation recommendation side, but we're two people that worked on it out of a great many that aren't here today. And I just want to make sure that I begin by thanking you for the vision in undertaking this project, for the RTC and its leadership in ensuring that it was done, and for all the people that contributed to some of the findings I'm going to show you today. The very first slide that's presented here is one that I always like to start with, and it seems to me that so long we talk about transportation, we talk about mobility as though it's an enhancement to a community, and realistically speaking, it's not that anymore. We are competing globally in almost every way. From an economic development standpoint, I think we all know we're competing globally. From a tourism standpoint, we are absolutely competing globally. And now, as our state rises again to the second fastest growing state in the United States, we are competing with other states in terms of attracting new people to our community. No longer is transportation considered an enhancement, but rather it is considered a baseline expectation. The ability to get from point A to point B is absolutely critical in every phase of our lives. I want to be able to get my kids to school. I want to be able to get to work. I want, if I'm a visitor, to be able to go from the airport to the Las Vegas Strip or to downtown. If I'm a convention traveler, I want to be able to go from one convention center to another without spending hours stuck in traffic, without the delay. There's no less efficient part of any of our lives than being stuck in traffic. We've all had that, but it contributes so much more when we think about the visitor economy that is so very important to us. It is an expectation that people will be able to move. It is an expectation of people who live here, but also those who come to visit. This transportation investment business plan, as Greg noted, is offered in draft. It is a substantial amount of work. It is intended to be a blueprint. You will hear it called any number of things, not the least of which is a living, breathing document. This is not where it ends, although a great deal of work has been put in that direction. But again, it is a continuation of a critical conversation that talks about two things: growth and transformation as we go forward as an economy, understanding where we are today, being proud of it, and reflective on the fact that so many people have made so many investments to get us to where we are today, and considering how we can do the same for those that will come after us. There's going to be a lot of numbers. I will apologize in advance for that. I am a data guy at heart, and so when we're putting together these kind of presentations, there's going to be numbers. I'll try and keep the number of decimal points to a minimum, but respecting the fact that these numbers matter relative to both the process and the outcomes. Number one is 150 engagements, or however we want to think about that in terms of the public and private sector. Countless meetings, countless one-on-ones with everyone from the Strip to the county to the city of Las Vegas. Steering committees brought forward by Ms. Quigley and Mr. Rollin Cotter in terms of bringing the community together to have these type of conversations. There were many of them, and I, as much as any project that I've ever worked on, input was listened to and was integrated into the conclusions. And so much of that is because as an analyst, I can look at traffic counts and I can count the number of jobs and the number of lane miles or any of those other things. But I'm not every day on the front lines of every roadway here, particularly those within our core area, understanding where the challenges are for our hotel and resort operators, understanding where the challenges are for the people that run our transportation system every day was critical as part of this. As I noted in the second number there, those 18 months, I like to say that what we're presenting to you is what was left over after we exhausted every other option that was out there. We went through an exhaustive process to look at alternatives, some of them very ambitious, others of them will seem very simple, all of which come together in a master planned approach to providing us the type of mobility that is part of that expectation that I talked about before. The bottom number is 122,000 jobs. And from that standpoint, from an economic impact standpoint, I love to think about things in terms of their ultimate economic impact. We often measure them in billions of dollars or activity or millions of visitors, all of those type of things. But at the end of the day, when we're ultimately boiling down the economy to the unit of measure that is most synonymous with economic activity, it is the number of jobs. It is how many people will ultimately be employed at the end of this investment cycle. And we believe that that number in the mid-case scenario is roughly 122,000 additional jobs. We've done great in terms of lowering our unemployment rate. Some of the numbers have really shown that we've done a great job. But we've got a lot of people coming through the pipeline, kids that are graduating from our schools and hopefully our universities, and ultimately are going to be looking for those jobs in an emerging economy. That is going to mean diversifying our economy for new businesses, and it's also going to make sure that we develop our existing economy to the extent possible. We're going to talk about 7 project suites in a 30-year study period. There are 65 recommendations that are included in the Transportation Investment Business Plan. Those cover some recommendations that are already part of funding activity that's going on. Those include policy recommendations. They include 55 recommendations on everything from sidewalks to freeways to roadways and on and on and on. Bringing those project suites into groups that are most meaningful are what we thought was important. If we're going to talk about getting from McCarran International Airport to my hotel on the Strip or downtown, one mode isn't going to get it done. If we're going to talk about going from the convention center back to my hotel or getting to a restaurant, one mode's not going to get it done. These are suites because they require multiple facets in order to make them maximally effective. always our focus was throughout this entire process to do as much as humanly possible with the infrastructure that we have today, and then think about what is going to be necessary when we have 10 million more visitors, knock on wood, and 1 million more people. I don't need to knock on wood, that's going to be inevitable, right, in our community, and what it will ultimately mean. 30 years. We had to come up with a study period for purposes of this. And normally a 30-year useful life is what we think about in terms of infrastructure assets, and that's why it's here. But what does that ultimately mean to us? It means over the next 18 years, we'll be building infrastructure. Some of those will be very soon, over the next 5 years. Others of them won't be completed until the 18th year of this cycle. The numbers that I'm going to show you not only include the development and pre-development costs associated with those, but also the operations and maintenance. We wanted to be as comprehensive and as transparent relative to the costs associated with these investments as we could be. What do those costs look like? Between a low and a high scenario, they are somewhere between $7 and $12 billion. Those are expressed in inflation-adjusted year of expenditure dollars. And those numbers seem very large, and I think they do to the community as well they should. I don't think we're ever going to talk about something that's measured in the billions of dollars and not say that it is remarkably significant. But I would ask as we go through this that you keep these numbers in mind as you compare them to the size of the economy and what it is that we're trying to protect and grow through these investments. The size of Southern Nevada's economy today is $95 billion in size. Over the next 30 years, our economy will have output measured about $3.5 trillion. We welcome 42 million visitors every single year. They spend $30 billion while they're here. You multiply that times 30 years, you're talking about values in the trillions of dollars. So while these numbers may seem big, I would just like you to keep that in the back of your mind as we continue to go through, that they are. They're significant. But in comparison to the economy, they are attempting to both stabilize and ensure the potential for growth. They are, in some ways, relatively small. Also, I think it's incredibly important to indicate what is included in those numbers and what is excluded in those numbers. On the left-hand side of the exhibit that stands before you, there's a number of icons. And all those icons aren't always that easy to read, but we wanted some way to essentially show you that we're talking about freeways and fixed rail, and we're talking about transit, and we're talking about park and ride centers, and on and on and on. And all those little icons you'll see on a series of maps that we're going to talk about before in terms of how they fit in to the broader transportation investment business plan. You'll notice that one of those icons, the rail icon, the fixed rail, light rail, icon, has a little orange area around it. And it looks like the orange area somehow got shrunk here, but nonetheless, on the right-hand side, you see that it's also over there. What that is intending to say is that we have included a portion of that, but not all of that in the cost. And there are very specific reasons as to why we have done that. So the portion that is included includes all the pre-development costs. We need to plan that out in the best way possible. We need to think about where it'll be aligned, how it'll work. There are NEPA processes and other environmental processes that are both necessary and appropriate to ensuring that when we are ready to go forward with that project, that it is in a position where both the public sector and private sector have an opportunity to participate in it and bring it forward. And let me tell you why that is. The estimated cost of that project is somewhere between $2.1 billion and $12.5 billion in total. Now, that is incredibly rangy. That's a $10 billion range. And why is that? Well, for a couple of reasons. Reason number one, if you go at grade, if you build it above grade, or if you go underground, the cost of those is very different. Number two, these aren't things that are going to be built anytime very quickly. Portland, as Mr. Knowles talked to me about on Monday, when he and I had a chance just to kind of talk about all the transit projects that were going on around the United States, recently opened their light rail system. That light rail system took about a decade, I think 12 years, he actually said, to bring online. We're expecting a similar timeline here. The unfortunate fact is that inflation will make things more expensive a decade from now than they are today. And while that is an important consideration in the cost, and whether it's above ground or below ground are important, I would suggest that there are other elements that are equally important. Number one, if you look at where we're talking about putting light rail, along that resort corridor, it is uniquely positioned for a couple of reasons. Number one, it has more density than almost anywhere else in the United States. We've got all these massive hotels and casinos. We've got other uses that are all located there. Those uses have the ability to drive traffic. They are attracting and demanding trips from one location to another. The second thing is that we have a ridership advantage in that particular area. That is to say, the trips are very consistent between the airport and the Strip, between one convention center and another, or downtown and an event center. Each one of those trips are very consistent. Moreover, we believe that the federal dollars that would be available for this project are more significant than any other project that we're going to talk about today. Somewhere between 29 and 46% of the cost of this project, we believe, has the potential to be offset by federal dollars. In addition to that, fare box, arguably one of the most important elements of any transit system, is how much people are willing to actually ride it. I will show you some numbers as we continue to go through our presentation today that will show that we have substantial competitive advantages here, the most significant of which, for purposes of this moment in our presentation, is that we believe that fare box will be more than 100% in terms of the revenue. Well, if we can throw off more revenue than it actually costs to produce this, if we can offset a substantial amount of that cost by getting money from the federal government, this opens up the opportunity to have someone in the private sector or some form of public-private partnership to come together and make an investment, because this is not just a subsidized transit project. This is an economically viable opportunity in a unique corridor that probably only exists in Southern Nevada today. With that, the goals associated with the project overall. I think these will come to you, no surprise to you, but I always like to at least start by enumerating some of these key premises that underlie still today the Transportation Investment Business Plan: to protect and grow the economy, to provide for economic diversity, to take our core area, which is so critical to our economy today, and ensure that it is able to maintain what is working now and look for opportunities to expand and diversify, to expand and improve the visitor experience. This is critical. We've spent so much money developing the Las Vegas brand. The worst thing we can do is not deliver on it. And ultimately to remain globally competitive overall. Critical for us. Mr. Rollin Cotter and the folks at the LVCVA, as well as all his resort partners, have made it particularly, they've made it a challenge to the community and themselves personally to increase the amount of international visitation coming here. Why? Because those international visitors stay longer, they spend more money, and if we really are worried about bringing visitors in, a target market of 35 million people in California or 300 million people in the United States pales in comparison to 6 or 7 billion people on planet Earth. Right? We are trying to market to all of them, and remaining globally competitive will be important in that regard. A few statistics just to put some of that into perspective. Right? 41.1 million visitors, 5.1 million of them coming for conventions. That means that we have more people coming for conventions in Southern Nevada than most markets in the United States have visitors overall. That is hugely important, particularly when we look at things like the fact that our rooms are, well, we're getting to be over 90-95% occupied, which means that filling midweek is going to be critically important. $13.9 billion in wages and salaries, $1.5 billion in state and local taxes. We have 3 major sources of revenue in the state of Nevada: property taxes, sales taxes, and gaming taxes. The tourism industry is number 1 in all 3 of those major sources of revenue. $29.8 billion worth of direct visitor spending, $50 billion worth of economic impact, and 42.8 million people getting on or getting off a plane at McCarran International Airport. That translates into the second busiest origination and destination airport in the United States today. I like to talk about McCarran being the single most important economic asset that we have in the community today. When you think about its linkage to that tourism economy, I think that probably stands on its own. All of that having been said, we are today in Southern Nevada the least diversified economy of our size in the United States. And while the numbers on the right are somewhat of a badge of honor for us in terms of how much we have generated in terms of employment and just how much we've generated in wages and salaries and how successful we have been, they should also be the thing that scares us the most about our economy. if we are singularly dependent for a third of our economic activity directly and almost half of our economic activity indirectly or in total, if people stop deciding to get in a car or get on a plane and come to Las Vegas, if they decide to take their convention elsewhere for whatever reason, not the least of which is they can't get from point A to point B, that will have ripple effects through every sector of our economy, from the government sector to the manufacturing sector to retail and so forth and so on. So much of that economic activity happens within an area that we like to refer to as the core area. We in Southern Nevada think about this area in many different ways, and it is not one thing. The reason it is not one thing is that that area in and of itself is roughly the size of the island of Manhattan. Right? It includes a great number of things overall. But if we want to think about how important that core area is to our economy overall, how many of the jobs, how much of our wages and salaries, how much of our property values or our taxes are collected, the majority of it happens there. Allow me just to put a few of the key statistics that I think are most germane. And they're not just about tourism. $36 billion in land value. 20%, almost 20% of all of our office space is located in those areas. Downtown has one of the lowest occupancy rates in the entire community and the highest lease rate we're generating now. It didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago, but that's where it is today. Hughes Center. What about the medical district that we're talking about creating? What about all the hospitals that are on Maryland Parkway? That's 1,530 hospital beds, all in that core area. Now imagine you can't get to them. What about 28,000 students at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas? Another core asset for us. Mobility around each and every one of these things, not only the fact that 37 of the top 50 employers that we have are located there, not only the fact that we've seen $67 billion worth of investment just from hotels and casinos alone within that core area. It is in all of our best interest. You know, I showed this map just a moment ago with that core area, respecting the fact that I wanted to paint it with the overall urban valley, respecting the fact that what happens in that core area affects everything throughout our urban valley. It is not a single thing. The resort corridor, the Las Vegas Convention Center, downtown, UNLV, medical districts, McCarran International Airport. This is my favorite map that the guys from CH2M Hill put together. I know it's got a lot of bubbles, and I just like that. But I think it really paints the idea of all of these things happening together within this core area, all of which are critically important. And more important than the bubbles themselves are these little lines for purposes of our discussion today. Those are the trips that we are most fundamentally concerned with. There are not thousands of them. There are not millions of them. There are a handful of connections that are fundamentally critical to the success of that particular core area that allow people to move. And this is why things like that light rail have become so important. We're not trying, it's not the traditional type of mobility where I'm trying to leave my home and get downtown. Certainly that's part of it. There's no doubt that that's part of what we're going to talk about today. But when we're talking about increasing the capacity and mobility of this core area, it is those connections that will ultimately drove our analysis and will ultimately drive this presentation and hopefully the discussion as it continues to move forward. In addition to that, I want to make sure that I am clear about the fact that we did not just think about streets and roads when most residents, probably me included, have a tendency to think about mobility. When they think about the Regional Transportation Commission, probably oftentimes they think about streets or they think about the bus system as it currently exists. But it is more than that. It is how taxis function. It is shuttles. It is how pedestrians can get from point A to B. It is the fact that the monorail is an integral part of that. It is the fact that people walk and take cars, that they have options relative to that overall, and that those functions all somehow work together. This just looks at how visitors move while they're in our community. I think the fact that the one on the far right-hand side is not the percentage that includes cars, but rather the one that includes pedestrians always needs to be in the back of our mind, and I will tell you it is part of our recommendations today. Uh-oh. Is this slide not quite working correctly here? All right, well, let's see what I can do here. Well, you'll forgive me that the slide seems to, perhaps there's just a difference in terms of the operating systems that we're working off here, but hopefully I can still make my point. I have a very, very hard time. Oh, you have hard copies. Will you please flip to the hard, can you tell me what page that's on? Would you mind? Okay, so it starts on page 9. Thank you so much. I think this will be a lot easier to see. Okay, sure. May I borrow a copy? I'm sorry. Thank you. Thanks. Does that work okay? Oh, terrific. Look at that. All right. Whoever the technology is, I have the mic, but he controls the world. All right. I think I have a really, really hard time expressing to people the challenge that we are really facing as it relates to transportation, mobility, and congestion. And so I asked the folks at CH2M Hill, all the traffic engineers, to help me create a series of slides that I think would help people better understand the challenge that we have today and the challenge that we will be facing by 2035. So what we're looking at here is corridor volumes for every north-south route within that core area that we just looked at. And of course, everyone recognizes all these, Valley View all the way going down to Maryland Parkway, so all within our core area. And then what we did is we selected a measurement location. We selected a specific area where we would measure how much traffic was going by. Each one of these areas. There's traffic counts. We have the ability to count from there. We then looked at the lanes and how much capacity we have on each one of those areas going through this core area. So in this case, each one of those north-south routes. And you'll see the capacity. This is a daily capacity that we have based on the number of lanes that are there and the functional classification. Freeways have more capacity than arterials. Arterials have more than collectors, so forth and so on. We went through. But all of these are part of this very complicated modeling process that's used for transportation. We then took a look at the volumes that are counted there. These are the current volumes as of 2014 that say, based on all the stuff that the state collects in terms of traffic volumes, how many cars are going over each one of those points. Now, all of those data are very important, and there's a way to kind of look at that. And so this is essentially looking at the volume and dividing it by the capacity. And I'm going to put a legend up on the right-hand side, and you're going to see that all of those green boxes represent areas that are essentially no congestion. You can think about these as completely free-flowing. This is the street you love to drive on. Then you get the ones that are kind of low congestion. All right, these have some congestion activity. Then we get to moderate. Then we get to heavy. That's when we have a problem. Then we get to severe congestion. You can think about this as level of service F. Right? This is as bad as it gets. And look at a couple of the areas that we have here, right? I-15 north of Spring Mountain. You know, these are some areas that probably all of us would look at and go, yeah, I know, it gets pretty bad there over time. Okay, we get it, but there's only about 4 of the total that are in that sort of bad color, if you will. So what happens when we fast forward to 2035? We add all the roads that are planned and all those things that are intended, at least as current today, and then we fast forward to what we look like in 2035. What you'll notice is that every one of the north-south routes is red. And you'll look at some of, please take the time to look at a few of the percentages that are there. They are troubling. Let me put it that way. And as the traffic engineers explained to me, and again, I'm not a traffic engineer, I don't intend to suggest that, but as they explained to me, we don't have as bad of a problem today because people have options. We're talking about every one of the major north-south routes in the entire core area, an area the size of Manhattan. And what they explained to me is that if something's really bad on the freeway, somebody will take off on Spring Mountain, they'll take off on Sahara, they'll take off on Charleston, they'll go around it, and they'll use one of the surface streets. Well, by 2035, the only option you're going to have to navigate the core area is apparently to go on Martin Luther King south of Alta, right? Not going to be very helpful overall. Now, again, I realize that our time is limited, and I'm not going to belabor this point, but I did the same analysis, or we did the same analysis on the east-west routes just to show it and put it into perspective. Again, this is the same analysis. We're only looking at different routes on the freeways. You get the ones that are showing there. Again, 215 west of the airport connector. I think we can all attest that that has a tendency to get a little congested over time, so there's no surprise that it's currently in red. Now let me show you what that looks like when we get to 2035. Every single, in this case, east-west route is essentially at its maximum capacity or beyond, which means that the core area will have the mobility attributes of a parking lot by the time we get to 2035. Again, just one way of trying to demonstrate in an illustrative format just how bad the challenge is that currently lays before us. All of that having been said, this is a quote that is in the report that I like. We've struggled as a community over the last several years. There's no doubt about that. And we have our challenges. But I don't think we have anything to apologize for as a community. I think that we are today a great city, and that is a function of leadership. It is a function of investment. It is a function of all of the people here doing what they do every single day. All of that having been said, we continue to build on our strengths and minimize our weaknesses. And in doing that, we must recognize that transportation is a clear and present threat, both to our economy and our ability to maintain the necessary flow within our core area. It will exceed its capacity over the next 2 decades, and they will become exponentially worse than what it is today. This brings us to something of a crossroads. We have a choice. We can choose to do nothing. We can continue to maintain the status quo. And when we do that, I like to measure things in terms of lost economic potential. If we just look at it in terms of traditional recessions, our report will look at it looks at it much more extensively, and we will talk about it more. But we're just talking about modest decreases in economic activity, not in the decline of our economy, but rather in the decline of the growth of our economy, is somewhere between $8 billion and $80 billion if we choose to do nothing, including just losing some of the growth that we may otherwise have. The goal, rather, is to remain competitive over the long haul. What are the elements to being able to do that? Number one, there is still substantial opportunity for expansion and growth within our core area and within our community. At the outset, there was a minority view of some way that, hey, maybe we're already built out. Maybe we've already gotten everything that we're going to get. Maybe the visitors aren't going to keep coming. Maybe population growth is going to slow. Maybe we're not going to see as many jobs or relocations. Well, that has proven itself wrong over the past 18 months. It has proven itself wrong over the better part of the past 30 years. I would submit to you that the idea that our economy is done growing is not the best thing for us to assume going forward. Quality growth will not happen without infrastructure investment, primarily transportation. Talk to any business, I know you all do from time to time, and how important it is for their goods to get moved, for their customers to be able to get them, all critically important. Large-scale and small-scale investments. Not everything is a massive investment. Some of them are relatively small. Some of them are just policies that we feel like need to be tweaked in order to maximize the utility of the infrastructure. Again, I would not minimize something that seems small or place too much emphasis on something that seems big. It is all of the elements coming together under a master planned approach that is critical. The visitor experience is paramount to us overall. I cannot emphasize that enough. The fact that 42 million people come as a percentage of our population, that is roughly 17% of the people that put a head in a bed on any given night, don't actually live here. Their spending accounts for a huge share of our jobs. Almost everything that a visitor does is subject to some form of taxation. That is something modern thought with regard to economic development, of course, is that you maximize the utility of what got you where you are while seeking out multiple specializations. We've announced some things recently that are pretty remarkable. In that regard, we need to continue to do that. And the last one is that planning must start today. As I alluded to, many of these things don't happen overnight. Light rail is not going to happen overnight. Creating high-capacity transit system is not going to happen overnight. Pedestrian changes, which I think the county has taken huge leadership on, is not going to happen overnight. These are things that will take a decade to complete, and if we don't start today, those little red boxes start to accumulate relatively quickly. One of the things that I think is important is that we have been very successful by the ability to develop our transportation network. We are getting to the point where we simply cannot build roads as wide as we can build buildings tall. right? We have talked about, particularly in the core area, of maximizing every acre that we have, right? We build things more densely. We build them with greater value associated to it. We have to bring the same logic to our roadways, maximizing every lane mile. Again, there is no less efficient use of a single lane mile than a single occupancy vehicle. It is very, very inefficient, both from an economic standpoint, but also from an environmental standpoint. What this chart attempts to show is what it looks like. If we just imagine for a moment that we have a roadway and we allow as many cars as can go past it. Every one car, every 5 seconds, we allow to go past that. We could get 35,640 people past that single point. You can see what the number is if we look at bus rapid transit. You can look at you can see what it is if we look at light rail. The idea is that we have to increase the capacity of every lane mile that we have if we're going to get even close to accomplishing the amount of increased mobility, the amount of increased demand that is going to occur within that core area. And why is it that we believe that light rail will be successful as a component part of that? These numbers are also a big part of our success historically and a big part of the foundation why the recommendations look the way they do. I talked a little bit earlier about fare box revenue. On the left-hand side of the chart is the United States average relative to fare box. Again, this is how much people are willing to pay relative to the cost of providing that type of transit program in major metropolitan areas across the United States, 27%. We could think about that in an alternative as roughly a 75% subsidy for those programs. In the middle of the chart there is what we do for Southern Nevada, 50% today. That is number one in the entire country relative to fare box recovery. That is something we should be very proud of as a community, our ability to do. But the one that is so critically important to this idea that light rail can be treated differently is the one that's on the far right-hand side. 163% is the fare box recovery for the transit activity that is happening on the Strip today. This sets it apart from any other transit that we might consider both in or out of Southern Nevada, but most particularly here. Because if it can throw off more revenue than it's costing us, it provides the opportunity for investment and ultimately for some type of public-private partnership. What else makes it critically important? Number one, 40,000, and I should say that differently, over 40,000 boardings every day in that particular area. Again, that will be volume that is remarkable relative to a system like ours. It represents 23% of all ridership and 34% of all revenue. And alone, those numbers are compelling, but together, those numbers are very significant because it not only means a huge amount of volume, it also means that people that are riding that are willing to pay more. That's why we get 34% of revenue from only 23% of our ridership. That is highly concentrated. Those trips are remarkably consistent. We are well positioned to do this better than almost anywhere else in the entire country. And from a private sector standpoint, oftentimes we think about things in terms of return on investment. We think about them in terms of net operating margin. Let me just give you a couple of those numbers. On the left-hand side, 39% is the net operating margin. That's how much money is left over after we pay for all of the cost of operating that Strip system. On the right-hand side is 19%, which is the net operating margin, not only after all the expenses, but also after accounting for all of the depreciation for all of the vehicles that are there. Again, setting the stage for public-private partnership, arguably unlike anywhere else in the United States. All of this, however, comes together in a series of transformative mobility solutions where all of this comes together are the recommendations. Turn it over to my friend and colleague, David Knowles, to talk through some of those with you.
Jeremy, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. I'm David Knowles, and I was responsible for developing the transportation recommendations that responded to the challenge, the economic challenges that Jeremy just outlined for you. My morning hasn't been as eventful as his, but I do want to associate myself with the expression of thanks that he gave. It's been a privilege for me to work with my consultant colleagues and with the leadership team at RTC. And I think you'll see that the work that we've done collectively demonstrates a lot of intense effort and a lot of analytical rigor. I want to begin by telling you about the process that we followed to develop these transportation recommendations. We had 3 major criteria for investment, a 2-phased evaluation process. We developed 5 types of recommendations, 5 types of transportation recommendations, and grouped those into 7 groups of recommendations that correspond to the main linkages that Jeremy showed you in his presentation. We had in mind throughout our work that we wanted to optimize the existing infrastructure, the existing system, to do what we can with what we have and to make it better. But we recognized that there needed also to be new investments in order to accommodate the kind of growth that Jeremy outlined. And we think that complementary to that is a series of policies and programs that can help leverage both the existing infrastructure and the new infrastructure. Our evaluation process had 3 major goals. We started with a transportation goal that was about creating a reliable transportation system, one that made you globally competitive, was reasonably cost, and created a good travel experience for visitors and residents. The transportation system really supports the other 2 goals that are around urbanization and economics. The urban goal is about the kind of community you want to have, the urban form, the civic identity, and the economic goal is about the kind of economy you want to have, what kind of diversity you want, what kind of workforce you want. There were 2 phases of analysis. We began with looking at the corridors, the ones that represented the main travel patterns within the core area, and Jeremy outlined those for you with those red arrows between the main economic centers in the core area. And we took a look at those, we determined what they were, and then recommended an initial range of viable modes and routing, and then analyzed those further, looked really in detail at what the travel patterns were going to be, and developed a series of recommendations that are alternatives that are contained in the report. And they fall into 5 categories: high capacity transit, surface streets and roadways, pedestrian improvements, freeway improvements, and policies and programs that complement that. So they fall into 7 suites or groups of recommendations that approximately relate to the main travel patterns. One is to enhance visitor mobility between the airport, the resort corridor, and downtown. A second is to improve pedestrian safety on Las Vegas Boulevard. A third is to improve the connections for the convention center and event facilities. A fourth is to improve connectivity between the core area and workforce population areas. A fifth is improving access from I-15 into the core area. The sixth is downtown circulation and access, and the 7 is programs and policies. Let me start with enhancing visitor mobility between McCarran, the resort corridor, and downtown. So the primary objective here is to improve the visitor experience for folks who are arriving at McCarran Airport. And we have a number of recommendations for both roadway and transit investments that we think will do that. Probably the primary recommendation, and probably the most transformational recommendation of all of our transportation alternatives, is for a light rail system that runs between the airport, the resort corridor, and downtown. The goal here is to create essentially a horizontal elevator that can move folks from what is really one of Las Vegas's lobbies to their room destinations along the resort corridor and in downtown. Light rail is absolutely the right technology for this. It has the capacity to do it. We estimate there's going to be 41,000 additional trips 20 years from now, and as you saw from Jeremy's presentation, there isn't the road capacity to accommodate those. It's a very flexible technology. It can be used below grade, at grade, above grade, and it can be expanded to serve the needs of a growing Las Vegas community. It's a tested technology. It's been in use for 30 years in cities throughout the United States. A lot of the folks who come to Las Vegas will understand what light rail is because they have it in their own communities. So we believe it is a very reliable technology and is the one to be pursued. And it has been shown to attract riders and to attract development in other cities in which it operates. is a suggested alignment between the airport and Las Vegas Boulevard. We have a number of different suggested alternative alignments. Those will be explored further in additional studies. And then it would connect along the resort corridor into downtown, perhaps onto Cashman Field. There are also recommendations for creating a multimodal center at the airport to serve as an interface between airport visitors and other kinds of modes of transportation. New transit center at Bonneville and at Cashman. We also have included street recommendations for enhancing Koval and Swenson Road with an airport connector elevated couplet, and improving loading areas at McCarran for taxis. A second category of improvements relate to pedestrian safety on Las Vegas Boulevard. Las Vegas Boulevard obviously is an iconic experience for folks. They want to be able to walk it, but they need to be able to walk it safely and to do so in a way that doesn't make the traffic situation even worse than it is today. So we're recommending a series of pedestrian bridges, 7 new pedestrian bridges, widened sidewalks where those are possible, elevated sidewalks where those make sense, and an improved wayfinding system that is dynamic, that responds to real-time conditions. The convention center is a very important part of the economic plan for the future, and there are transportation recommendations that will help support the expansion of that kind of business, the extension of the monorail to Mandalay Bay, a new monorail station at Sands Expo, a potential monorail spur to the LVCVA expansion facilities, and if there is high-speed rail from Southern California, an extension to that station. We also are suggesting some pedestrian improvements that complement the movements in the area of the convention center, and road improvements that will help improve circulation to and from those facilities. You have a very important and growing workforce in the valley, and it's important to create a system that can help transport them efficiently. We've identified a potential expansion of the transit facilities in the region. You have Maryland Parkway, which is already into a detailed study of an alignment and modes along Maryland Parkway and into downtown. But there are also potential for other regional high-capacity transit and expansion of existing transit centers throughout the valley. In the core area, we're never going to get away from a situation where vehicle access and mobility is very important. You need it for goods, you need it for services, you need it for visitors. And so we have identified a series of improvements to I-15 that we think will help with access into the core area. They include additional connections, a new interchange reconfiguration at Tropicana Avenue, drop ramps at Meade, Harmon, and Hacienda, and potentially an I-215 HOV direct airport connector. Downtown has a special set of recommendations. These are intended to help add to the vibrancy of the downtown area. It includes a circulator trolley that would operate to circulate through the area and help improve mobility of pedestrians and visitors. New pedestrian bridges that help with some of the barriers that exist from the roadway and from wide arterials are included as well. And some improvements to the streets and freeways in the area, again, to help vehicle access into the downtown area. The final set of recommendations has to do with policies and programs. I'll just mention 2 here. One is the creation of a resort mobility corridor mobility association. The idea is to create a forum in which providers of transportation, the event facilities, the resort properties could talk to each other around specific events and then just around general transportation issues. And so they could better coordinate all the transportation options that are available to visitors and to residents. And a second is parking management. That's very controversial in every city I've worked in. The idea of managing parking a little differently than it's managed today. One idea is that free parking would no longer be available. And that obviously is very controversial, but on the other hand, it does change travel behaviors, and depending on the situations you face, that may be something that the region needs to consider. So those are the policies. I just want to close by saying that Jeremy has expertly outlined the economic opportunities that you have. I can tell you as an urban planner and transportation person that if that's the economy you want, then these are the transportation investments that you need to have. Jeremy?
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, we've talked about the economy generally. We've talked about the recommendations that are included. One of the critical elements is to consider how such a plan might ultimately be funded. Am I okay to continue?
I think everybody's waiting for the funding part.
Okay.
So
Sure.
don't leave us hanging.
So the cost, again, $7 to $12 billion, inclusive of the projects that Mr. Knowles outlined and the pre-development activities associated with the light rail project are shown here. You'll notice in the, well, let me say this differently. When we looked at how similar projects are funded across the United States, there is no silver bullet. There's no single source of revenue that's going to be used. They're all different, and they all include a mix of revenue sources. What I've shown you here is the major ones: federal funding, state funding, local funding, and then what is captured by everything else. I'm sure what will jump out at you is the same thing that jumps out as anyone that looks at this chart, and that is local funding is the largest share of the total, and this is the reality of what we're looking at. In terms of federal programs, we believe that total funding would be somewhere around 16% of the total plan that has been brought forward here. There are a number of federal programs that are out there. They take on many different forms, and they have many different requirements. Nonetheless, we would increase the opportunity to have federal funding flow into the state of Nevada by making a number of these investments. In addition to that, state funding. Again, it's not going to come to surprise anyone here. State funding is remarkably limited, and in some ways we could think about it as being oversubscribed. There are two sources of state revenues that have been considered here. One is governmental services tax revenue, and the second is state gas tax revenue. They represent roughly 2% of what we're looking at in terms of the funding of the program, somewhere between $250 and let's call it $310 million. Other funding is largely private investments at this point. There are a number of recommendations that include things like the monorail. They will make investments as a private company to effectuate some of the recommendations that we've seen here. We believe the total for that will be roughly 4%. In addition, this over a long period of time, there will be other programs and other opportunities that will come up. Nonetheless, we're looking at about 4% of the total revenue from the program coming from what we're referring to as this catch-all of other funding sources. That brings us to the largest of those funding sources, 78% coming from local revenues. There are three major sources of revenues. Number one is the fare box revenue that we talked about previously. The second is RTC sales tax revenue, and the third is airport revenue. Of course, the asterisk next to airport revenue reflecting the fact that it is highly restricted relative to what programs it can ultimately be used for. But we're talking about $5.5 to $9.4 billion in terms of fully funding this from the residual piece, which is local revenue. That can be broken up into two component parts. The one that is essentially funded, or we refer to that as allocated, and the second piece, which is unfunded or unallocated. The unallocated portion is $3.7 billion to $6.6 billion. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to come up with between $3.7 and $6.6 billion tomorrow. This is over a 30-year time horizon in terms of our study period. We think about things in terms of pay-as-you-go financing. We think about them in terms of debt financing. If over the study period we thought about it in terms of debt, it would be somewhere between $86 million and $135 million a year, with a peak debt of somewhere between $155 million and $243 million a year. Of course, the ultimate goal would be to find a way to smooth that out over time, but I wanted to be reflective at least of the preliminary scenario that was included here. Now, the idea is that those funds would be used to both transform our economy and stabilize what we have today, given the expected amount of congestion that's there. On the high end of the projection cycle is $12 billion worth of investments. I just want to put those numbers into perspective for a moment. Yes, it is a substantial amount of money and should never be trivialized, but in relative to the amount of economy that we're talking about, I think you'll find the numbers less startling than they might otherwise be. If we think about it in terms of the size of our economy, we're talking about an investment that is less than 0.5% of the economic growth during the study period. It's about 0.5%. If we think about it in terms of every visitor that comes to Southern Nevada, at least all the ones that came last year, spent on average $724 per person per trip. If less than 1% of the people that would otherwise come to Southern Nevada do come because transportation is not a problem, the $12 billion would have been offset. In addition to that, congestion is currently costing our community and the residents and businesses here an estimated $1.4 billion every single year. If we are able to reduce that growth in congestion that we're expecting by about 16.8%, essentially the whole cost of the project would be offset. Now, those are the break-evens. That's the point at which the cost of the project effectively equals the cost of the economic benefits associated with it. These are the numbers that we actually expect in terms of return on our investment. The $12 billion is expected to get us somewhere between $56 billion and $178 billion worth of increased economic activity. I can tell you that that is an increase of 0.25 or 1/4% in our growth rate up to 0.75 or 0.75% increase in growth. That is consistent with what other communities that have looked back at what their investments have produced have shown. In addition to that, I would argue that we are better positioned than many of those communities. If we look at it, and
excuse me, just now these costs that we're talking now, do they include the long-term maintenance?
For the 30-year period, they are including both the construction and the operation and maintenance all the way through that 30-year time horizon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of visitors, and I always like to put things in visitor perspective. We're expecting an increase, this is the mid-case scenario, of roughly 30 million visitors with roughly an extra $21.4 billion in increased visitor spending. With regard to congestion, I wish I could stand up here and tell you that these projects were going to end congestion as we know it in the core area. As the traffic engineers have let me know time and time again, that's not the way it works. We are creating increased capacity. It will always be a struggle to get people out of their cars. We're creating options and ability for us to grow beyond the confines of what we are. We believe that a realistic reduction of congestion is somewhere between $4 billion and $13.1 billion in reduced congestion. And there are many ways within the report that we've looked at this return on investment. We believe that the benefit cost ratio falls somewhere between 2.2 to 1 and 4 to 1. We've used a midpoint of $3 of return for every $1 that we invest. Again, arguably conservative, certainly consistent with what other communities have seen, and not totally reflective of that tourism economy that's so important to us. Also not reflected in there are some of the qualitative concerns, and I call these qualitative. I understand that some will say, hey, these are things that we absolutely need to think about measuring, but what I'm telling you is they are not in the analysis that I did. I wish I could stand up here and tell you what the value was of not having people walk out onto Las Vegas Boulevard because they can't get around some obstruction on the sidewalk. I wish I could tell you what the benefits would be of greenhouse emissions, or the fact that, frankly, people would be able to get to work easier than they would have been able to otherwise. All of those things have a real value. I would suggest that they only add to what I've shown you here today. All of that boils down to a single slide, the concept of being proud of where we came from, understanding that where we are today is a reflection of a lot of investments and decisions that were made long before many of us were here, and the idea that we want to continue to grow and prosper as a community. What does it mean in the context of this business plan? Number one, navigating the next steps for every recommendation. Every one of the recommendations in this report comes with a series of steps. It does not end here. They will require action both from the public sector and the private sector to take what the RTC ultimately delivers and bring and move it forward. Number two is to look and find and evaluate and develop additional funding sources. We are going to have to be creative relative to that. We are going to have to think long-term relative to that, but we will need additional funds in order to effectuate these recommendations. To incorporate the projects into the respective plans, the process from a community standpoint is extensive. The idea is to have these ideas, these concepts reflected in all of the community plans, and finally to initiate implementation. transportation. There are many of the programs here, we started tomorrow, and in doing that, we will take a substantial step to ensuring that that tomorrow is the one that we want to have with that. With that, Mr. Chairman, I am grateful for the opportunity to be here, and will be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jeremy. Mr. Knowles, thank you. And we'll start with Mayor Lee.
Thank you. I have to get out of here in a second. I might have an answer for you. Hyperloop. I don't know. I'm always hustling, you know. But interestingly, we have a world-class hospitality tourism venue. We have a sucky delivery system. I think all of us know that. I guess my question is, would the airport be the first on the list of projects to undertake, or what is the cost-benefit analysis work out to? That'd be I got another question after that.
Sure. Mayor, it's a bit of a difficult question to answer, and I'm going to try and answer it in two different ways, and if I don't completely answer your question, you'll make sure that I do. Number one is, you're absolutely right. The airport is our front door for better than half, or roughly half, I should say, of the visitors who come. It's the first thing that they see and the last thing that they see. Critically important. There are recommendations in here for everything from a multimodal center that will take a very long time to address, to addressing some of the challenges that we've had with the cab lines, which is an immediate issue that we can get to. The broader question that you may also have been alluding to is the fact that McCarran International Airport also made a substantial investment, right? We developed T3, which means that we now have capacity at McCarran International Airport to take us up to what I've historically referenced as 55 million passengers. My understanding is the number may actually be more than that, based on Ms. Vasiliadis' comments last week. All of that having been said, if we get to that point, we will not be able to move that many people on our streets today. So not only is McCarran critically important in terms of being the first thing that many visitors see and the last thing that many visitors see, it is also a reflection of the capacity that we have that we are going to need to be able to serve as we go forward.
Right. I'm on the LVCVA board and on the subcommittee for that Riviera demolition and the new wing that we're going to put over there, and we have to fill that. We have to make that a wonderful experience for it to be successful. But I love your presentation. I guess my other question would be, this might be directed to the director. Tina, is the 215, it's not near completion, but it's getting where you can see an ending date. Could that money roll over into, if we were able to finish the 215, that was a funding source that's available, just like we do in the Senate, state bond rollovers and stuff like that?
So I'm going to turn that over to Mike Hand, our Director of Engineering. But the funding sources that fund 215 might be designated specifically for 215.
Yeah, development, we'd have to check with the county. I have not looked at that in quite some time, Mayor. Fred, if you've got something on that.
No, I don't have anything, but part of the revenue that the county is using for the Beltway is the development tax. A few years ago, RTC relinquished all of that to the county, and so once the Beltway is constructed, it's possible that could be used for other programs.
Yeah. I just know we're down to like 5 to 7 miles on the north part, and it looks like there's a completion coming, but I know I'm all for this, Chairman. I think this is great, and it's going to be actual leaders that are going to make these decisions and take it from the visionary stage to the leadership stage, and I think this is Tina, applaud you.
Yes, well, we can come back to too. I think we've been talking internally. We'll come back with a list of prioritization and recommendations, things that can be accomplished in the very near term, so that way we're taking baby steps towards moving towards this very, very large goal. We've looked at this comprehensively, and now moving forward, we can start to take a look at the smaller pieces.
Yeah. Thank you. Great presentation, Jeremy.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner?
I have a couple of questions, Jeremy, and I appreciate your passion on this. Were Uber, Lyft, and any of those new types of car rides in your taxi numbers or in your formula in some way? Because it's a new expansion, it's another opportunity, but it also can add to the congestion. So I just was curious if...
The answer is absolutely yes.
Okay.
Certainly conversations were had as part of those discussions,
Right.
respecting the fact that The ability for some of those organizations to engage is, of course, going to be substantially different than some of the businesses that are here that were engaged, particularly the taxis and the shuttles. Wherever we could, we tried to understand how TNCs would play, respecting the fact that throughout this 18-month process, as I know you're well aware, that was constantly evolving. We
Right.
tried to adapt it as best we could, certainly utilizing some of the estimates that have been developed. Is it perfect? No, but we certainly have tried to reflect
Okay,
it.
and I think the modeling will continue to be updated anyway, so I think that that's appropriate. The number of employees commuting to the Strip used to be a 38% or something like that. Do you?
Yeah, it's roughly a third. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your question.
That's
It's roughly a third of the total. There are about
third.
300,000 people that are working, and you say the Strip, and I'm thinking sort of the full resort corridor, so my numbers may be slightly different than yours, but if we start talking about everyone that commutes to McCarran International Airport, if we start thinking about everyone that goes downtown,
Right.
if we start thinking about everyone that works in transportation to restaurants, that number just gets I would use 300,000 for that, because I do think that's a reflective number, just in understanding that that represents not just people that work in hotels and
Right.
casinos, but rather that entire corridor and industry.
Yeah, and then they run the Flamingo, the Trop, and Paradise and Swenson and all that part of it that come and go. I saw that you have air quality and health as one of our, a benefit that we could have if we have a multimodal component. Is any of this predicated on the expansion of the convention authority? Any of your numbers? Because if that doesn't, with no disrespect, I know there's a committee working on it, but if they don't obtain the financing or agreement, then that may not be about. So, but that shouldn't restrict what we're trying to do multimodal-wise.
Look, as part of the analysis, we tried to look at every project that was in the development pipeline, and there are many of them. As a matter of fact,
Right.
statewide, I think we've got almost $17 billion worth of projects that are planned, proposed, or in the development pipeline, the vast majority, of course, which are here in southern Nevada. The expansion and development, refurbishment of the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, Las Vegas Convention Center is absolutely a piece of that and was considered throughout the totality of the process. Is it the only project? No. Is it an
Okay.
important one? Absolutely.
Okay. And then the 215, maybe part of the discussion at some point as we bring this forward to the different groups and working still with NDOT, is it would be a perfect opportunity to do that transition of they take over the beltway and the local governments obtain our highways that are really our roadways so that we have the ability to move, with no disrespect, a little bit faster when we want to do an improvement or do a pedestrian or do whatever we need to do. I'm thinking of Councilwoman and I share, Charleston, it's a state highway. A lot of people don't realize that, and so we have to always work with our partners to do things, but part of that conversation may need to be sped up so that we have the flexibility to do what I would call the low-hanging fruit. There are probably within 1 to 5 years, things, well, as you said, we could start tomorrow, and I think that that's what we should personally take the opportunity while we're doing the longer-term planning that comes into play. And I know we've been having conversations with Tracy, and that's going to come back up, but I just throw that out there because it's a perfect opportunity, especially when the Beltway is finished. Then if it is dedicated, but there is that thread of dollars that we could redirect, and local governments could have some redirection of those dollars into other programming areas. And then that was going to wind up, at some point, will you break out, or somebody breaks out for us, the 1 to 5 year components, like the Harmon Avenue, the east-west on the Trop, the possible one-ways considered again on Swenson and Perry. All of those, to me,
We
are
will.
things we can do sooner rather than later, and that I think that begins to prove out to people, because a lot of folks say, oh, this is just a vision. Well, no, there's things that we can actually do today that really start to move us towards that longer-term plan. I love the idea of the circular pedestrian crossovers on the Strip. What a great idea. It accommodates ADA, gets the flow going better. I mean, there's just a lot of things that come into play there, but that's something that we ought to be looking at planning for sooner.
Noted.
So I just hope, Mr. Chair, I'm excited. I mean, I still offer up, and we're in the study period for Maryland Parkway for light rail, even if we can't get to light rail yet, but we plan and have different types of modality going down there where it complements the buses, the taxis, the TNCs, and whatever. But I think that's a game changer, connecting the airport to North Las Vegas as far as that's concerned. I think you pick, it's not just better for our community, it's what our visitors are used to. And here we are just talking and still having arguments about whether or not we'd run light rail on the Strip. Get over it, you know, and you can quote me on that, I don't care. You know, having traveled myself to over 85 countries, I ride transit everywhere else, and it just blows me away that we still have not moved forward on that. And so we have, as a community, to really look at how we base the quality of life for people that live here, as well as the expectation from our tourism, as well as the fact that we want to keep pace and be competitive. And if we don't make it easier for people to get around and get to where they want to go, and it's better environmentally, and you know, and all those other factors that come in, then we're going to lose out on those tourists. And I think we've got to recognize that part of it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman.
Thank you. You know, I think, as you pointed out in your presentation, that these are transformative times, that we're definitely looking at ourselves differently, and not only at this board, but other boards that will be looking at this conversation, our community planners and also public policy leaders who are having to make decisions that are for our future, that we're planning not just for today or for next week, but we're planning for the next 20, 30, 50 years, and how our community will continue to be thrive and be a vibrant place to live, work, and play and do business. And you know, we're competing with other communities that have moved aggressively down the road, whether it's Phoenix, Salt Lake City, Denver, Orlando, Chicago, Portland, Seattle. They're moving down the road, looking at how they're moving their tourism. And if we're going to remain competitive in that marketplace, we certainly have to look at that as well. And it was just, I think, 3 years ago that we brought the mayor of Mesa, Arizona into Southern Nevada to have that conversation with us, because they adopted light rail in their community. And he sat at the airport in a bus line for an hour before he could get I'm sorry, not the bus line, but the cab line, before he could get a cab to take him to his hotel. And that's the kind of thing that when you have people talking about how we're moving people through the valley, and you have a leader, a thought leader from another community who's moving a public, and they're saying, well, I had to wait for an hour at your airport, that's problematic for us. And he's someone who came in to talk about rail and how his community, a very conservative community, adopted rail because they knew that it was the right solution. And I think, so it really does make a difference. You know, we did outreach with Southern Nevada Strong as well, hearing from the community about what they wanted and needed going forward. And clearly the top things were jobs, education, and transportation. And they called out the importance of rail in our community as a part of our solution moving forward. Again, this is that 20 to 10, 20, 30 years that we're planning for the future. So I could see at some point that while it's really focused today on the urban center and where the jobs are being created, that there are folks who are going to those jobs from other parts of our city, that the rest of the community is going to want at some point in the future to participate in that conversation, to drive transit opportunities to their communities into the Strip environment. So I'd like to thank you for your presentation. I think it was very thorough, and I am anxious to hear from other thought leaders around the community who are going to be weighing in on this conversation and this study going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other comments? Mayor.
Just real briefly, I also want to commend you for your presentation. I think it's very forward-thinking, and I love the fact that we're looking forward, not just 1 year at a time, but 5, 10, 15 years into the future. One of the most important comments that I think that I heard today was Mr. Knowles at the end of his presentation. He says, if this is the kind of economy you want, then this is, I'm here to tell you that this is what you need to do. And I believe that. I think that's absolutely true. So that begs the question, is this the kind of economy that we want? And my guess is we're probably going to say yes when we have that dialogue. But this is also, if we do this, this is not just going to be good things that are happening. It's going to create other traffic problems throughout the valley, not just in the core area. So we need to be thinking about, and I know that this isn't part of this particular dialogue, but we need to start having the dialogue. How does this impact me, in the outlying areas, or just the residents? Because If you have an economy that's creating 122,000 jobs, if you have I-11 that's coming in that's increasing traffic, if you have, Faraday going in that's creating another, several tens of thousands of jobs or more, and other things that are happening, if you're growing an economy, you're going to attract people and more jobs in other ways, and that doesn't necessarily alleviate the traffic everywhere else. It alleviates the traffic in the core area, but it makes it worse potentially in the other areas. So that's what I'd like to see us start thinking about as well, because you need to be ready for that. If the answer is yes, we want that economy, then we need to know that there's going to be huge growth and huge pressure for the residents as well. And so just, food for thought, and maybe that's more directed to the RTC in general, that we need to start thinking about that.
Thank you. Jeremy, do you have the ability to go to slide 65?
I can't see the slide numbers, Mr. Chairman, but I'll keep going backward until you tell me to stop.
Stop. That's good. That's close enough. So the other funding, this is a question that whether the committee or the team discussed. In that other funding, you talked private sector investment. Is there any type trend across the country having that slice of the pie grow dramatically? And I ask that simply because the local funding, if you were to look at those pieces of that pie and say, where do we anticipate getting additional money or sustainable money, the other funding to me would be where we should be looking for that new revenue, that expanded piece of the pie.
Mr. Chairman, the brief answer to your question, I think, is yes. I think if you look across the United States, and I'm going to talk a little bit broader than just transportation infrastructure, but infrastructure overall, I think what you found is that communities strapped for having sufficient revenue to be able to develop something are looking to try and make those projects economically viable for the private sector to come in and at least participate. There are many services that are provided by the government, transportation not the least of which every one of us benefits from in huge ways, streets, highways, all of those type of things, but which we don't always see the economic value because it's so much just embedded in everything that we do. I think that in many of those projects, whether those are looking at hospitals, whether that's looking at roads or jails or transportation or any of those type of things, they're looking at elements of them, whether that's developing transit-oriented development or finding ways that you can have those be revenue positive. So those projects in and of themselves can be economically viable. A huge portion of that is getting that private sector participation to either develop, operate, or some combination of the two.
Okay, came into today's presentation, staff did a great job keeping elected officials away from this plan for 18 months, which is probably the best thing that could have happened. But I came into the presentation with a question that's been posed many times prior as far as what is going to make this plan, this vision, this document different from the dozens of plans that are sitting on many of our shelves. Well, maybe not sitting on our shelves anymore, sitting in some PDF file somewhere. That's been in the back of my mind. And timing-wise, certainly the answer came through today with not only the analysis that brought forth a lot of the intuitive things that people know, but the effort that went in, the stakeholder group, the broad-based input, I think is a critical difference. Now comes the point where timing-wise, coming out of the recession, and this is my personal perspective, but as elected officials and as public agencies, this is the first opportunity that I think over the last 15 years that we as policymakers and public agencies have the ability to define what we're going to be over this 30-year period. During the growth time, most governments were playing catch up with the private sector. During the recession, most governments, public agencies were playing survival. This is a snapshot, this window right here that you've discussed today, I think is the defining moment if, and it's a big if, we can come together and build consensus and have this direction to define literally all the things that have been brought up in this presentation. So just fabulous. And I know the 1,800 pages that are available online. For the public's information, and I'm sure we're going to communicate this immediately, is that we'll have, is it going to be a 60-day window, Council?
It is, and just so everyone knows, the draft business plan is online on the RTC website now for public comment, and we'll have a 60-day period for public comment and interaction with the consultant team. And again, we'll be back in March for a formal adoption of the final business plan after those concepts and conversations fully occur.
Okay, so we'll accept public comments probably beyond the 60 days, figuring that the holidays, January, February.
We will be back in March, so yes, we'll give people Christmas off. When I say 60 days, we'll put a final date on it so people can be aware of what it is.
And we will actively solicit those comments from our citizens, from our stakeholders, the business, all the different communities that were discussed today. And at that time, we would take in those recommendations, see if there are other things we can add to the report. The other piece of the presentation, I really enjoyed hearing that this is going to be a living document. I mean, as Commissioner G mentioned, there's some low-lying fruit right now that can be done and perhaps has already started with some of the projects identified in the overall plan. But the fact that we're going into this, asking the community what they want. Not only what they want, what their priorities are, and certainly getting into the how we pay question. But the fact that this document is not being sold or presented today as this is the way it's going to be, I think is critically important. There's too many competing interests out there, not only with the transportation infrastructure, but with Mr. Roland Carter's expansion plans, with potential stadium, and all the other, I think you threw out a pretty large billion number statewide that is out there as far as needs. So that's greatly appreciated. But this is a call to action, not only from the elected perspective, but more importantly from the community perspective, because we will have an opportunity. And I think the opportunity will be past us in the next few years unless we do take action. The charts that had all those colored bars turning into red, that's a reality. I mean, that's a reality, and the decisions that have to be made in the next few years to prevent that and to see this plan to come to fruition, critically important, obviously. Commissioner.
Thank you. Excellent points. I'm just thought, with seeing that UNLV just purchased property, that's a perfect opportunity to do some east-west roads through there. I think that they need to be put on their radar screen that you're going to do some stuff to make sure that that area moves properly if you do something, whether it's a village for the campus or a stadium for the campus. So those are things that we're all going to have to be sensitive to as developments come to us, to be a little bit more sensitive about what the transit opportunities and obligations are, and start asking people to step up earlier rather than waiting and going, oops, we should have asked for, like, MGM Stadium's going to be an issue. But if you get the spur there, maybe there's some partnerships that come into play. So there's different ways to look at that, but thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I think there were Mr. Hobbs I saw, Mr. Barrett I saw earlier. Those that were active on the planning effort, raise your hand, wave.
Hey, do it. Be proud.
There you go. They're hiding. They're hiding. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And the last question before we go into public comment is, what's the difference between a .com / or .com /? Just in case I have to go read these 1,800 pages downloaded online. All right, with that, thank you, Ms. Quigley. We'll go to our next public comment period.
Item number 24 is just to receive your last citizens participation period.
This is the second time set aside for public comment, those wishing to speak to the board. We have our list. If you didn't sign a card, you're still welcome to speak. Marcia Rodriguez. Could we get the handheld? I have the handheld. Whichever's easier, Marcia. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Marcia Rodriguez. I reside in unincorporated Clark County, and I'm a very frequent rider of paratransit, which I am so thankful for. It allows me to go to all the places I need to and to try to be active in my old age. But like all businesses, whether public or private, we need to pay attention and make improvements when we can. And I don't know if everyone's aware that in the bus, when the bus driver goes to a destination, if it's going to a business, it just has the address. It doesn't have the business name. And I think it's a lot easier to see the sign than the number. The numbers are kind of hard to find. So I make a suggestion that on the manifest and on the computer that they include the business name, because what's happening, it's happened to me in the last 3 months, getting no-showed. For you that don't ride paratransit, that means you get 5 points. When you get 18, you get suspended for 2 weeks. And that's not the whole bad part. Then you have to talk with someone there. And I don't know if I'm talking with RTC people or if I'm talking with TransDev, but they have an attitude, I'm wrong, I've made a mistake. And you know, in our country, I thought we were innocent until proven guilty, and that we're not in a court. And I don't appreciate their attitude. So I would suggest that addition. I mean, it shouldn't be that costly to make that change, but it would save the drivers time. And that's what they're trying to do, is make them make more pickup and drop-offs per hour. I think it would increase their numbers in doing that. And the other thing, you'd be amazed at how many of the drivers don't know north, south, east, or west. Now, you would think the GPS would tell them that. It does if they go east, west, north, or south. But when they go on a private property, say a large complex, and their instructions are, if they would read the manifest or the computer, says, west side of the building, double doors next to the stone bench, and they go to the front of the facility, the GPS doesn't say which direction it is. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Marcia.
We'll have staff get with Marcia after the meeting.
Beg your pardon?
If you would wait after the meeting, we'll have one of our staff members get with you. Thank you. TK Washuda. Good morning.
Good morning, folks. I moved here about 2 months ago from Los Angeles, and I and my roommate are on RTC buses 7 days a week. On 3 occasions across 7 weeks, I have a reduced ID and I have a reduced pass. On 3 occasions, every time I purchase this and I insert it in your fare box, you have defrauded me out of a 15th day of riding. Okay, this one began November 28 at 1:46 p.m. In theory, that should last until December 13th if we count forward 15 calendar days until 1:46, but this one expires the day before at midnight. I have addressed this with your Bonneville clerks. I'm tired of addressing it. They're tired of hearing of it, all 4 of them. Then, when I come over here, I have to take a separate bus, the 109 or the 108, and your Bonneville people will give me a free 24-hour pass to accommodate me for this shortage. They maintain a 3-ring binder, a handwritten 3-ring binder of people that this has been visited upon. These are the people who are mindful of the dates, who know how to count forward 15 days. One of your clerks said the reason this happens is because of the card stock. The card stock on the 15-day reduced is somehow suboptimal to the regular card stock. That is a glaring outrage. Outrageous. Now, I'm going to come buy a new one this Sunday on the 13th. Excuse me?
You address your comments up here.
Sure.
Thank
you. This has happened 3 times. That establishes a pattern. It is definitely fraud. Let me move on. I don't have much time. My roommate and I have witnessed a number of racist, no, not a number, a large number of racist incidents on these buses. Lines 108, 109, 203, Sahara, and the 202. A 202 operator of a certain ethnicity told my friend who's seated out here in the gallery, open the door from the outside. And he said, what? Open the door. While she's sitting in the seat, entertaining her friend. And he pushed the door open from the outside. I filed a complaint against that. It took 3 weeks and 3 phone calls to your customer service for that to be investigated. Then I get from somebody, and I didn't print out a copy of it, an outrageous response saying that she was given instructions to her bus rider and that the door was defective and that a supervisor was made aware of it. She told my friend, open the door from the outside of the bus. Okay, what else? You have no lighting on the Centennial bus stops on Howard Hughes Parkway. They set in the dark. There's 2 of them, bus stop 1, 2 sides, bus stop 2 sides, in the total dark. You need lights on that. Can I continue longer or no?
How long is your
30 seconds. Okay. A woman on the 108 bus the other day got on and she lined up her grocery bags against the stairwell, the wheel well in the front, in the floor. The bus driver did nothing about it. He pulls up to Paradise and Convention Center. A handicapped woman with a walker got on, and that woman with the bags told the woman with the walker, you better pick that up and don't you run over my groceries. The driver, who was of a different ethnicity, told everybody else in line, go through the back door. Nothing was done about that. He tolerated that and was afraid to say anything to her because he's afraid of a civil rights claim. I see this every day. My friend sees it every day.
Thank you for your
There's
comments.
other stuff. Can I speak to somebody in senior management?
If you would wait after the meeting,
Sure.
we appreciate your comments. Thank you. Any other speakers?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Alita Dupree, for the record. Again, ALETA DUPREE, a female service-disabled Desert Storm veteran from the Rancho Sahara section of Las Vegas. And so just some miscellaneous things. Thank you for the presentation before. To Jeremy Aguero, I am looking forward to downloading this file and reading it on a rainy day or when I get tired of watching Netflix and etc. So that's exciting. I am looking forward to the changes in watching last month's video of RTC, seeing you sign the consent agenda, and seeing the consequent approval of the Basabi mobile ticketing contract. I'm looking forward to the constructive action in implementing this program with all deliberate speed, because this is happening in other cities. I have my San Francisco Muni Mobile. I will be using it when I get to San Francisco. It's not, they don't have all of the ticket options yet, but it's coming. So it's about having options. Yes, I have my bus pass. This is a 15-day bus pass. It does give me the entire 15 days. I went and counted it on my hand, so every one of these have been fine. But I am looking forward to this and this. How do we get there? To not have to do this to go from this to this to this. I do it in my daily life. I think I've done less than 10 cash transactions in an average month. So pardon me getting all my things out of my life back here. I do like these new 15,000 series buses. I've been on the long ones, but not the short ones. The seats are a little hard, but I can understand upholstery can be kind of hard to deal with, so I like these new seats. They're fine for me. I hope that we'll get more of these buses out on the road, more of the disabled seating, especially get them on the new buses on the MAX line, 115, because I do a lot of travel up to Nellis Air Force Base in what I refer to as the Northeast Kingdom. I'm co-opting a term that's used in Vermont to refer to the 3 northeastern counties. So I'm looking forward to seeing this new equipment out there. Let's get some more service on the Strip. I know you can't guarantee everybody a seat, but it's getting pretty crowded out there. So let's see what we can do about that. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Lita. Next speaker.
Dennis Hennessy. I work for Keolis Transportation, one of your contractors. I noticed this side of the room and all the staff rolled their eyes and said, "Oh no, he's back." I've been gone for the last several months. I've had some personal things going on. Excellent presentation by your presenter today. It was pretty awesome. The reason I'm here today is to make staff really aware. Earlier this year, you had a company come before you the right way. Big Bus came before you and asked your permission to utilize your bus stops along the Strip. You researched it, you did the right legwork, you did everything you needed to do to tell them no. And they have respected that. I drive the Strip, been driving the Strip for 6 years. I wish the other transportation companies in this town would listen to it. You got all of them pulling into our bus stops, letting their people out. And guys, it's getting to be a problem. But that's not the real problem. The real problem is if you and the county commission, and I speak, Mr. Brown and Chris, to you in particular because you're on the county commission, we have a taxi cab authority here that pretty much keeps the taxi cabs in check. They don't pull into our stops very often. They don't stop on the Strip very often and create congestion. But nobody is doing anything about your Uber and your Lyft drivers. I'm sure you could contact Ramona, who handles the ambassadors on the Strip. I can tell you that every trip I go down the Strip, 3 to 4 times an Uber driver is parked in the middle of our stop, and we're unable to service customers. Now, if Metro or the taxi cab authority, who has no jurisdiction over these Uber people, if they're not pulling them over, giving them tickets, doing whatever, it's just going to be a matter of time before the thousands of taxi cab drivers are going to start saying, they're taking my money away from me, I'm going to start pulling into those stops. So if I'm pleading with you and with staff, if you guys don't do something now, it's going to be a real nightmare. And you need to hold up how Big Bus came to you and asked for permission, and they were denied. The other bus companies are just doing it. If you don't do something about Uber and Lyft, the taxi cabs are just going to start doing it as well. And by the way, our buses are still filthy, and it won't be long before dirty driving comes back.
You couldn't help yourself, could you? And Dennis, just FYI, and I hope things are better, but during that absence, there was plenty of conversation about the TNCs. So you can certainly catch up with either Chris or I. I mean, it's a huge challenge.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jose Mendoza Jr., President Business Agent for the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 1637. That was a nice presentation from TIBP. Our only concern in the future is hopefully it doesn't have an impact on the future RFPs, because we do represent almost 1,000 bargaining unit employees. So hopefully in the future, the RPs doesn't have any impact on their proposal, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, just to give you an update regarding the MV CBA, we were hoping we'd come in today and tell you that we already have a CBA. We don't. Apparently, we did agree to binding arbitration in regards to the wages. And MV's attorney, apparently there was an issue that happened and he needed an extension. So that being said, we don't have no say on that. We just have to wait. But hopefully, before the new year, the other half of the bargaining unit does have some wages increase, so let's see what happens. But the other part, they are enjoying a CBA, which we go back into negotiations in 2017. Other than that, though, MV does need to be kind of put on check because we have 4 ULPs against them. Under the RP, they're not supposed to be violating any federal or state laws. And it is a shame that they just want to run the business without even contacting the union of working conditions. And that is a shame. But we'll deal with it, and that's something that we have to deal with it. Anyway, thank you. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Any other speakers?
Chairman, just, I am going to have to leave in just a bit. Okay.
Hi, my name is Randy Botzett. I'm Vice President and Business Agent at Teamsters Local 631 here in Las Vegas. Just want to give you guys a quick update. We currently are in negotiations with Transdev North America on all 3 contracts for the paratransit division. We do have extension at this point that we're working under, and we are sitting at the table moving forward. So that pretty much ends my report.
Thank you. Commissioner G.
Thank you. And I know everybody has to go. Just perhaps, I want to make sure that both with our companies, that we're doing training with them, with our security guards. I'm getting some reports of discrimination, especially with women that may be of Muslim faith that wear scarves, and both from clients sitting on the bus as well as not from drivers that I've heard from. But I would hope that we're tracking any potential conflicts and have some ways to resolve that. But I do think it would be important in this time that we make sure that there's been some sensitivity training with our folks. I don't want to put a driver in conflict with correcting somebody, but sometimes there's appropriate way, or our security. So I would hope that there's a process that's in place, but I would just ask us to take a look at that.
Why don't we have Deputy General Manager MJ Maynard report back to you?
Okay.
Happy
And
to
then
talk about the companies.
for Dennis, the TA does regulate the TNC, so we'll have to let them know about that. Maybe part of it, right now it just says buses only. Maybe we need to designate that as public buses only, and that helps us figure out. But I didn't even know there were other companies other than Big Bus, so we have to take a look at that. Thank you.
Any other speakers?
Board and those interested in the audience, we do have a lunch and learn. We're hosting a lunch and learn at the Springs Preserve. Our speaker will be Robert Groh, who is the founder of Envision Utah. Will share with us some of the aggressive approaches Utah has taken in their regional planning and transportation planning.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.